Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here with another Product Growth Leaders conversation. You know, Steve, this was not in our plans to talk about this week, obviously, because it just happened yesterday, but big news all over social media is when it comes to product management realm. One of the big .coms, do we still call them .coms? Maybe they're not .coms anymore because they're apps. That shows how old I am. One of the big app companies, Airbnb, is getting rid of product management as they were doing it. They're going to let engineering and design take over the product management stuff and refocus it more like Apple, they said, as a more product marketing manager. This week's topic was advice to the CEO on product management. And it seems like it's like a perfect topic for that, right? To me, it seems like they're taking that technical, tactical role of product management and leaving it to design and engineering. We're letting that strategic role, the role we talk about, the role we're going to talk about today, be called product marketing. Where's your head on this?
Well, you know, I have been seeing this in a number of places over the last few years. I remember I went to a conference 2 or 3 years ago, and this guy got up and was talking about the importance of the role of product marketing, understanding the market requirements, determining what competitors we're going to face, and, ticking off a bunch of things that I consider to be strategy. And the person sitting next to me said, "Are you hearing this? They're redefining product marketing as what we used to call product management." But as we've talked about on this show before, it's like so many consumer companies, at least, have relegated product manager to Jira monkey.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not actually opposed to that decision. I don't care what title we have, but somebody needs to be making the strategic decisions about the markets to serve, the products to build, and the competitors to go after.
Yeah, completely. And actually, I was talking to longtime participant, hasn't been on in a long time, trying to get him back on, Robert Goldberg, and he said, "I think product management as is going the way of the wind, right? When it comes to the tactical role, they don't have the ability to do strategic." So, we already had picked this topic. Hell, we'd already been doing it before the Airbnb announcement. I'd already picked it and scheduled it before I talked to Mr. Goldberg. But what a great conversation this week, and advice to the CEO on product management. Now, on Monday, I put this question in the community: what would your advice to a CEO be on getting the most value from product management? Eva, you came out strong. Allow all members of P&E to be their true selves. If they see an issue with the process or product, create a safe space for them to be transparent. It seems like you feel like there's a lot of baggage, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of, product management can't speak their mind. Talk to me more about where your head is.
Well, I feel like sometimes the product managers that may be, the shiny senior principal product managers that are kind of top of the food chain kind of get the space to speak and feel supported, whereas maybe someone who isn't a senior or principal level and maybe is a newer PM is a bit afraid to speak up. So I just think in that regard, it's good to make sure everybody can voice their opinions, talk about process improvements, talk about what the competitors are doing and how we can be strategic and stand apart. But I think everybody needs to bring their opinion, because not everybody's going to have the same background. So just let people from all levels talk, and talk freely.
Wait, you want product managers to be free to do critical thinking and think strategically and actually speak their mind and speak truth to power?
Yeah.
Sounds like crazy talk to me.
Oh my gosh. But how sad is it that we have to even point that out, Eva?
Sad. But I think, I've only been in the game a little, I've been with my company a year next week. And it's, it's not, I'm not going to go right up to the CPO and tell him what I'm thinking. I feel like that's not I don't feel comfortable doing that right now. So maybe in the future.
We can get him on this.
That reminds me of an anecdote. I went to a dinner with the president of of a company I worked for, and halfway through the dinner, he said, "So, how should I run the company?" And I'm like, "Seriously? I'm sorry. What is happening here?" And he's like, "Oh, well, this is what happens when I go out with salespeople. You know, by the time they've got a couple of drinks in them, they're like, 'Let me tell you what you need to do to run the company right. You know, you big dumb fool.'" And so he's like, "Hey, you know, you're a former sales guy. I'm sure you've got an opinion." And we ended up having a really interesting conversation from the point of view that I had as a product management leader, rather than as a sales rep. But it was interesting that he was open to having the conversation for real. One other similar anecdote, I have another president friend of mine who takes couples out to dinner, and I basically asked the spouse, "What won't he tell me, or what won't she tell me?" Which I think is hysterical.
That is an interesting, assuming that your open communication, that at home you have better communication than you do at work.
Well, yeah, but I mean, how often do you come home and you're like, "Oh, let me tell you what happened today," and you spew all this nonsense, right? And so my president friend says, sometimes I learn more about what's working and not working in my company by talking to spouses.
I am glad my president 20 years ago never did that, because I would come home from work and my direct boss was Hispanic. The president of the division was French, and my accents are so bad. My wife was always like, "Well, which one was that?" But actually, the president has become a great friend and mentor who, I loved working for and learned a lot from. So Paul Hatala, actually, I wanted to bring his out. Unfortunately, he's not here. He said, "I would first convey that product is a craft. Everything else builds from that foundation. Most organizations would not shoot from the hip when it comes to decisions about quality or HR, yet they behave as if product is voodoo. Only once that paradigm is safely assured, I would move on to clarity and vision, responsibilities and resources. While I've become comfortable with the dysfunction of pushing strategy up the organization, is just incredibly inefficient. Next, I would advise to have just enough process framework to make the next decision, starting with fundamentals. Don't waste time on things that are not moving you towards business value." He says he's never met a CEO who got that far. So, I think a lot of us are fighting this battle. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to put this topic out there, was to make sure that we could see what other people think. How do other people communicate? What do they think? Danielle Maravelas, so good to have you on the call joining us. I loved your answer. Coming right out of the gate with a strong one. Start with clarity, lead with communication, and hire people who are smarter than you. Talk me through, you've got a list of 3 things that you went through a little more in depth on those.
Yeah, so I kind of broke it down to the fundamentals, or at least what my opinion is on the fundamentals that are necessary to be able to get CEOs on board and be able to see the value of product management. I think where it falls short often is when we don't funnel or don't have a really clear sense of the business goals and strategy, and we can't funnel that back down into product. If that disconnect is there, that makes it extremely difficult. So having a CEO be really, really clear on, and they don't have to know how it ladders back down to product. They just need to know how they want to move the needle for the business or the organization. So being super clear about that is really important. Next in line is the communication piece. I feel like that gets missed a lot as well. There's a lot of ambiguous communication or lack of communication, and people often assume that because they said it one time that people are going to latch onto it. And so I think that having that constant communication there, and developing a communication strategy and making sure you're revisiting topics early on and often is highly important to make sure that your PMO can deliver the most value back to the business. It comes back to making sure that people are in sync and aligned. And it's probably one of the most basic things you could do, right? It's a really low tech solution. Just have the conversation and have it again and again and again. But I think people overlook that a lot. I've had the opportunity to work in a couple organizations where I had really strong leadership where they were really amazing about saying, like, here are our goals and objectives as a business, right? Ask all the questions that you have. We're going to revisit it again. And then what I want you to do, PMO, right? Take it and tell me, how does this translate to product? In those organizations, we did really amazing work. There were a lot less bumps in the road to get there. There was a lot less confusion. We were able to execute a lot more quickly. On the flip side, though, I've also worked at organizations where there really wasn't a very strong or clear business level strategy. And so without having that there, it makes it really difficult to bring it back to product. In those cases, the best we can do is make an assumption and say, this is what we assume the strategy to be for the business and organization. And this is what we assume we should be doing in terms of product to achieve some of those goals. You know, you only have so much data to go off of, and at the end of the day, you can only be told, no, that's not the right course, and get corrected, or people will let you run with it. And then the last part of that, I think this goes back to, Eva, this is something that you had mentioned where, you know, you're not feeling like you may have the platform or space to speak up as a product leader. And I think that that is an environment that is unfortunately enabled by having or lack of strong leadership in the product space. Your product leaders or your superiors should be creating a platform for you. They should have, right, they're going up to bat for you. So they're clearing the way, they're giving you space, and they're supporting you and backing you up when you need it the most. And that's how you can help, you know, lift your voice up within the organization. And that's a way that they can make it more equitable for different levels of product leadership within the organization to have and bring their opinions to the table. But again, this goes back to having, you know, from a CEO's perspective, hire people that are smarter than you. We don't want the CEO necessarily to be a product person. We want the CEO to handle the day-to-day of how to run the business and rely on and engage with other people across the business who can get really specialized and tailored in their domain, product being one of them. So make sure you've got smarter people in those positions, and they should be able to uplift the rest of the teams to excel and move the organization along in terms of product development.
Yeah.
That was a little long-winded, sorry. You know, I'm very passionate about product and could go on for hours, but I will reserve some more talking space for others.
Well, so some great points. I was actually just on with a client this morning who was doing a big strategy presentation. And I'm like, let's start with, you can't answer these 4 basic questions about the corporate strategy. And what you recommend is different depending on how they answer them. Why don't we make some assumptions of what that is? And too often product is left to make assumed strategies that they have to validate. But great, you know, great entry into the topic of the week in the conversations, Danielle. Thank you so much. May, you let your roommate answer this week?
I did. So for context, my roommate is not a product manager. And in fact, after I left my previous job and he took a day off and he was ready to be at home without me talking about product. And I had 3 calls that day with people who wanted to talk about product. He said, I thought I was free. Anyway, so I read the question out loud and he said, mimicking my voice, you have to start with culture. And he's right. Like, it's like, think about what the role of the CEO is, right? The CEO's job is to create an organization that can get to the goals of the business, right? And that's usually to make money, but it's usually to make money in a certain direction. Because like if you are a company that sells washing machines, you have no business no selling cookies. So you want to make sure your entire organization is aligned, right? And so you as the CEO, you are a part of the team that makes decisions about how your organization is structured and what that structure is supposed to do. And so do you have the right people doing the right things? And is it comprehensive enough to get to where you want to be? And earlier, I think this week or last week, John Cutler posted, unless if you're in a very new startup, it starts with long-term strategy informing organizational design. Get that right, or more right than wrong, and lots of things, including goals, gets easier.
Yeah.
And I think that is what we need the CEOs to understand. It's like you don't own the product. The product's there to help you achieve your goals. You have to set the goals, but also make sure you're building the right company to achieve those goals. Because, as product leaders, we have no influence over who the sales leader is, who the engineering leader is. We have a bit of influence over that one. But as a whole, it's about the larger company. Like, are we structured to do the thing we need to do? Do we have the right people in the right places? And it's not even just at the top, it's all the way down. Like, do we have, do our people understand what we're trying to do?
Yeah. I mean, some repeating things. I mean, I think Eva started with it, but I mean, partly we have to set a strategy. We have to communicate the strategy. We have to empower people to do their jobs and listen to them. And that, I think if you do that, you have the right culture. Now we just need to get John Cutler on here.
Someday.
So, oh God, I would love that. Marco, frankly, learn to trust your employees and give them a reason to trust you. I mean, it goes back to culture, doesn't it?
It does indeed. I mean, I'm also with Eva on that one. The one thing that you need in an organization like that is psychological safety. There's a very insightful book I'm reading right now called The Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson. And it talks exactly about this, and also what can happen if you do not have trust in your organization. I mean, look at Volkswagen Dieselgate, right? Look at Pandora, look at Wells Fargo. It's all the time when the organization was just too afraid to speak up because of repercussions or just the assumption that the CEO had all the answers, right? He must know what he's doing, right? So let's follow. It's the blind leading the blind sometimes. So CEOs need to be vulnerable enough to admit that they don't have all the answers and bring in people that can help find them. And so this is really where culture comes in. This is where empowerment comes in, of course. But at the same time, too, you can't fight on all fronts. As a CEO, it doesn't make sense to get down to the nitty-gritty in most cases and be so detail-oriented that you understand every single feature, nook and cranny of whatever product you may be selling with the organization. So just give context. Let people understand why you're doing what you're doing. How does it fit into the bigger picture? I see this very often, actually, in organizations. Pretty much all organizations I've been in my past. There's always this lack of direction. Remember my idea about that fish, right? And the fish turns the head and the tail has to do 10 times as much work. That's really the case all the time. It's this ambiguity of not really knowing if we're doing the right thing. So let's try this, shiny object I see in the chat right now. That's basically it. And then the organization is not questioning it. They're just following. And what happens, is exactly what happened in some of these organizations I've mentioned earlier.
Yeah, completely and totally, Marco. And actually, I've met Amy Edmondson and actually have a picture somewhere of me with Amy. Amazing researcher, thought leader.
One last quote, I can't remember which CEO it was, who said, the worst thing that can happen to a CEO is that people don't tell you the truth.
The emperor's new clothes, right? You start telling them what you think they want to hear. And you used the word psychological safety. Eva posted it in their chat, and Eva actually remember you actually brought it up a couple of weeks ago on our call when you posted something in the Slack channel. And we're actually, I think we're going to do a topic of the week on how do you create a psychologically safe environment. Nils Davis has been on this call many times, and he had a great post on it, did a podcast on it. So I'm thinking of trying to get Adam Thomas, because we talked about it with Adam when we did his survival metrics, get Adam and Nils lined up. And then when I know I've got them some week, will you make that the topic? I think it could be an amazing conversation about how do you make it, right? How do you enable it as a product leader to do that type of stuff? Dominic, you had a few nuggets of advice for success for getting the most. Make sure they're on board to start with, right? So talk me through what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I won't repeat, all the great nuggets that we just had already, but I mean, in a nutshell, to me, one thing that is absolutely critical is for the CEO to have his staff on board,
Or her staff.
his or her staff on board, correct? Make sure that they all understand the value that product management brings to the organization. Because it's one thing to have, product management, run their, product lines and whatnot. But if at the really higher level, executive level, there's not this alignment, it's very, very difficult to give this value, right? So it's all about alignment. And I've seen that a few times, specifically in metrics organizations where you have businesses run in a region with P&Ls, with their own priorities, and you have, product management trying to deliver value based on customer insights and whatnot. And if that's not aligned at the top, it's very difficult to deliver the value.
No, completely and totally. I mean, I think maybe that's the magic wand, right? If we could get the entire leadership team to understand the value of product management, maybe sometimes though, I think that product leaders themselves need to understand the value of product management and what it can do if we're going to get them to do that there. Calvin, you've been sitting by very patiently, and as so much wisdom has been coming out. What resonates with you? What do you want to add?
I was going to say some of what Dominic had said, and kind of piggybacking on that, but in a more, I guess, brief way, which is the CEO should understand what product management is and what product management isn't. I mean, I think that really starts at the top. And once that's clear, there's that opportunity to, kind of what May and Danielle said, making sure that you have the smart people that are leading product management doing that job. And from there, it just kind of, trickles downward. Because I think, we had kind of a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago, where the consensus is that many of us have been in companies where the person that we report to as a product leader doesn't have the product management experience, and when that happens, I mean, that's part of the responsibility of the CEO to emphasize the value of what product management is, what it isn't, and making sure that there's a leader in place that emphasizes that importance of product management.
No, completely. And I can imagine that there's a place where, this is me going back to that conversation a few weeks ago, the one place I could see a non-product manager leading product management working is somebody who was a stakeholder leader and saw the value of good product management. So almost as a buyer becoming a product manager, you've got a head of engineering who realized that good product management was what made their team that much better. I could see something like that maybe stepping in. But the point is, too many people, even product management leaders themselves, don't understand the strategic value of it and what can be done with it. Dutch, any thoughts from your side? I know you're mobile, so.
Yeah, you can hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Great. Yeah, so I was actually just consulting with a colleague of mine that had decided to do a startup with some generative AI stuff, and he had one developer, and he was like, I need other help to consult and like figure out how to get this startup off the ground and everything. And so I was talking about his vision and what the product needed to do and such, and already had the developer connecting, um, a service to a payment system. And I'm like, why are you worrying about making money on this if you don't even know if anybody's going to pay for it? That's the last thing you need to be doing is connecting it to Stripe or PayPal or something. And so we started going through some things, and I did a little bit of research in the market, and I was like, this is going to sound like I'm going to burst your bubble, but there's a silver lining around this. And I said, I just did a quick search, really, and there's already a dozen companies out there that are doing your thing. But you have a vision of how this needs to function, and none of the other competitors have that angle. They're just doing generative AI to do it. And so if we can focus around that nugget, that's going to be the heart and soul of the entire product. And so we started going through other things that I was telling him, look, you're going to need people that are going to be able to advise you on marketing and sales and customer success and all these other things. I've got your product side here, as we've already discussed. And he's like, yeah, Dutch, I think you'd be great to lead this along, but that's a lot. I'm just going to pull the plug on this. And he backed out of being a CEO. And even though he'd started a website and all this other stuff and started paying money for different services, he's like, this is more than I thought it was going to be. And, we still had some conversations about whether that was the right choice. Maybe he needed to be like on the board of advisors of his own thing and have someone else be the CEO. He understood the value of product, and then everything else we were discussing made sense too. But he just knew that he wasn't the right person to try to get this off the ground. And it was a little disappointing, but at least he understood, so that way the next time maybe he wants to do it or be involved in a startup, he at least understands the value of product, what the prioritization of features and putting things in the right order is all about.
I mean, that's an interesting. What really hit me there, often a startup, a founder needs to do product management, right? They're the ones who need to understand the problem and solve it. And once you explain to him that, and he realizes it, it's like, oh, frick, I don't want to do product management. That's hard.
Well, yeah, but he didn't want to do that or be the CEO either. He knew he could have someone do product, like myself, or maybe someone for this community or something. But yeah, so he got it, and fortunately, it was very quickly. It was only a couple of weeks we were collaborating.
Yeah, well, I think that's key, right? We've come across a lot of things, and one thing there is like, you have to have a vision, you have to have a strategy, right? You need to understand the problem you're solving and who you're solving it for. One thing that was left off that I haven't seen here. Go ahead, Dutch.
And also why yours matters in comparison to the competition or others that are doing something similar. What sets your product apart from everyone else that's doing the same exact thing?
That's exactly where I was going. I was a judge for a panel for in the lab product management. Emily Patterson's been on this call when we did our diversity call. She leads in the lab. Amazing program to try to get underrepresented people into the product management community. And this team was doing an amazing presentation, and I just wrote 3 things down. I said, what's your differentiation? What's your target segment or persona? And, what's the problem you're solving? What's the value for solving that for them? And I think that those 3 things would be, that should be at a minimum what the senior leadership has to be agreeing on, and the CEO has to be doing it. Any last thoughts before we move on to the poll, Steve?
Well, I was just I always bump on the in a good way on the word alignment. It has been my experience that every VP is running an independent company with no cohesive strategy. And I was talking to a president not too long ago, and he had called me to work with his product management team. And he said, I've been here a short while, and I just figured out what the problem is. And that is product management doesn't own the roadmap, sales does. And what has happened is they acquired a number of competitive products with the intent of having moving all of those customers onto the flagship product, but the sales team didn't like the flagship product and they continued selling the other products. And that's just clear, just a clear example of a lack of alignment, even among the leadership. The VP of sales should have said, I'm sorry, we no longer offer that product. But the VP of sales is being paid on money from any source. He should be being paid on money only from the flagship.
Yeah.
Right. But anyway, alignment is a big deal. And I think that my message to the CEO is the product managers are helping you make sure that your strategy is aligned across the company.
Yeah, to sort of bring back Marco's fish, and this was he talked about the fish a few weeks ago, where the head of the fish, it's easy to turn, the leadership can make decisions to change, the back of the fish, the tail, it takes 10 times more effort to make it change. I've often heard of that strategy and that vision, that leadership as the tip of the spear. We're the tip of the spear. The reality is, unless you align all the weight of the wood behind the tip of the spear, it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. And so I completely and totally agree that alignment is so key, that we need to do this. And again, a word we use a lot when we're doing stuff. So let's move to the poll.
One more little rant before the poll.
As always.
The other thing is, oh, hang on, I'll do my rant button. The other thing is, executives should be working on the business, not in the business. They should be turning, much of what they often are doing should be done by product managers or apparently product marketing managers.
To your point, doesn't matter the title as long as somebody's doing that.
Right.
All right, now to the poll. On Wednesday, I put in the community this poll. What is the main reason why CEOs don't understand the value of product management? They don't have product management experience. They are too short-term focused. The lack of strategy impacts the value of product management can deliver. Product management leaders have not properly communicated the value, or other it depends. Jason Weber came in with other it depends, basically saying there's not even a lot of organizations have done well enough without proper product management. And so partly goes into that maybe they don't understand it. But if people have succeeded without proper product management, they don't know that they need it. It maybe just was one of the things that happened. John Krog had voted they are too short-term focused. That was 10% of stuff. But otherwise, we got a backlog. Everybody else is split evenly in the poll on the lack of strategy that impacts the value of product management, and product management leaders have not properly communicated the value. So I'm going to go to 3 of the people on the call who were in the second one. The product management leaders have not properly communicated the value. Eva, I'm going to start with you, but Dominic and Calvin, I want to give you a chance to chime in as well. Then we'll go to those people on the call who have voted for the lack of strategy. So Eva, talk to me about product leaders not properly communicating.
Yeah, I was really torn on that option and the strategy option, but I think at the end of the day, as a leader, you should be able to say what is valuable to our company, what is valuable to the future of our company, why are we doing what we're doing? Like, why is this valuable to our customers, our clients, our stakeholders? And I had put in the chat, there's so many companies right now that are jumping on the AI bandwagon that should not be jumping on the AI bandwagon because it has nothing to do with their product. Again, show me why AI is valuable for our product if we aren't a technology company or one that, associates with, that type of technology. So anyway, I just think at the end of the day, cut and dry, tell me why this is valuable, tell me why we're doing this, and I can do a better job.
So the product management leader expressing the value of product management, that we help people make those decisions and make it focused on the product and managing the product. Awesome. Dominic.
Here, I'll take full responsibility to help communicate, what product management has for value. I think that the product management role, as I was saying in the chat, is still kind of new and many times confusing, and involves with product owners and whatnot. agile is in the mix as well. So, put your feet in the CEO place, right? He's easily confused with what's happening and maybe not be familiar with all the roles and responsibilities. But I think what's is often seen as a potentially a support function like other type function in a company, and doesn't it all goes back to us providing clarity on what value we bring as product managers. And why it's so difficult, it's because it's very difficult to measure. And I think we need to find ways of helping CEOs understand how we bring value at the end of the day.
Yeah, and too often it's like something gets delivered successfully, and development's the one who has metrics to that. Sales sells stuff, marketing creates leads, and measuring the value of product management is something that's tough to do. Calvin, any thoughts to add on the product management leaders have not properly communicated the value?
Yes, I do. So in other disciplines, there's more of a common understanding of what those are. If we know we have a sense of what finance is, or what HR is, or what accounting is. Product management is much more interdisciplinary, and so even amongst us, or among other companies that we worked at, or at least I'll speak for myself, I've worked at, the role of product management in each of those organizations is very different, and really varies by company to company that I've worked for. So I think that it really becomes incumbent upon those leaders to be able to communicate that value, not only upward, but across the organization.
No, completely. Steve, it reminds me of the conversations we've been having on our hierarchy of needs pyramid. And it really is, and it's not just product management specific. There's really the base level is intradisciplinary. Can we define something, what we do within our discipline? What's the commonalities, common language, and what those roles are within our, whether it's product management, sales, or something else. Then it's interdisciplinary, where how do we work with others? And then it's strategic alignment, which is about how are we all aligned around the same thing. Very well put, Calvin. Thank you. May, Danielle, and Marco, you guys all came on board with a lack of strategy where I was as well. Danielle, I'm going to give you a chance to be the first one to sort of, explain your vote, and then we'll get to May and then Marco.
Yeah, so I chose this particular answer because I think, strategy is our guiding North Star. Strategy tells us what, the greater vision is, what we're looking to achieve. And if we don't have that strategy, from the top down, makes it really hard to be very intentional and deliberate about what we're delivering with product management, and more importantly, how we're delivering with product management. If you don't have a clear set of directives or objectives, how do you know that you're going in the right direction? How do you know that you're focusing on the right things that are going to move the right needle? And so, I think it is highly critical. And so if organizations don't have strategy, I would encourage them to be open to having those conversations and getting clear and iterating on it, right? You don't have to have a very in-depth strategy right away to start moving in the right direction. But I just see that a lot of organizations and a lot of leaders are just not open to it. They don't even see the value of importance around strategy. And so that relationship between strategy and product management value gets fuzzy as well.
I would, and I'm maybe stepping on May or Marco's point, but I think that product management is probably impacted more than any other function by lack of strategy. Sales is still going to sell, development is still going to develop, other people are still going to do stuff, but product management is about that strategic alignment and empowering it. Sometimes I feel like it's harder for us. May.
So you can define what product management is, but like anytime we go about defining product management, it does have like this flavor of idealism to it as well. And
Yeah.
I think we've all been in a situation where, either us as product leaders or the product leaders that we're working for is struggling to align what makes sense with what is officially the corporate strategy. And
Yeah.
I think it is just the it's not really a lack of strategy, it's a lack of the various strategies coming together and making sense together.
Yeah.
Um, it is like, because we can define what we say it is, but in the context of that organization, the context of that market, and the context of that everything, the product today, it's going to evolve over time, and that definition, the value of product management, is going to evolve over time as the company scales, as the product matures, as you introduce new products in that portfolio. So I think in terms of like, a lot of the times, you have a strategy that works for a little while and then it just kind of stops working. So how can we continue to update the definition? It's really hard to update the definition because it's like, okay, this is my current understanding, so therefore this is the way it's always going to be. um it's a really difficult thing to understand, as everything changes around you, because like, it is a complex system that we live in. Like, even just the product management bubble alone, let alone like every single other piece of the organization. Does the CEO have a bandwidth to understand the changes in product strategy? The changes in like how product management has to evolve with the company? It's complicated. I think it's the main reason why. It's like that lack of alignment between the strategies, and how it's really hard to evolve it together across all of the different silos.
You could probably change that from the product management to every other function in the organization and have the same be true, right?
I feel like
Lack of
this is
strategy.
how I like kind of co-opt every single topic of the week.
No, you never are co-opting if we're going down the strategy path, May. With me, I'll always let strategy path
This is
go.
why you let me do it.
Marco, I did. It is Marco. You also voted.
Yeah. A Boeing salesperson once said, if we had a customer that paid us enough to make forks, we'd be making forks. And that's why the salesperson is not the CEO. It's value, right? It provides revenue, but it's not a strategy. It's not something that grows, not something that can be applied, that scales, right? That you can build an organization upon. And so, I mean, if you don't have a strategy, it's literally the blind leading the blind, right? You go in every other direction. You change directions again. We're back on the fish. But at the end of the day, you're not actually reaching the goal, right? Where do you want to be? What is your mission? And what is the vision of where you like to be able to end up 1, 3, 5, 10 years from now? And that requires a strategy and not short-sighted return of investment, so to speak.
No, I get it. And I know that's probably why John Krog voted for the short-term focus. Dutch and Steve, you guys are going to either break the tie or keep the tie. Dutch, where would you vote on this?
I'm going to have to pass. I'm in traffic I need to focus on, but so far it's ditto. I wouldn't be a tiebreaker anyway. I'm agreeing with everybody.
All right. Well, Steve, you get to officially then be the tiebreaker.
I am not going to break the tie. I think the issue from my chair is the reason CEOs don't understand the value of product management is they've never experienced product management. I think what they've experienced is secretary to development, and don't really see product management as a strategic role. When a job is ill-defined, and this is where the product leader should be starting. Let's define some roles here and be really crisp on it. But if the executive team has never seen good product management, then they don't value it, and there's your problem.
I get it. So I guess we're gonna have leave this one tied, and we
It's
say all of
tied.
the
Unless
above.
everyone wants to change their vote to agree with me.
Now you're starting to sound like me, Steve. All right. I don't think we can get to everybody on this, but Steve, this aligns exactly with what you just said, right? What can a product leader do to help move the needle with their CEO?
I want to go first, and then I'll let everybody else weigh in. But I got a call a couple of years ago that just really flummoxed me. The company had laid off the entire product management department. And a month later, HR called all of those product managers and said, we just figured out what you all do. Would you come back? And of course, nobody was interested in going back to a company that had dismissed them all in that way. But I don't know what they do. All right. Well, hey, if I'm the product leader, if I'm the VP of product or the CPO, I think that's the first task, is to get leadership to be clear on what product management can do and what they should not be doing. Reading aloud to salespeople from SharePoint is not really a important activity for product managers.
No.
Yeah, they do.
I completely agree. Eva.
I mean, the only thing that comes to mind for me is that show Comedians in Cars Drinking Coffee. I think the, CPO needs to do that with, the product leader needs to do that with the CEO, go out for a coffee chat, or maybe something stronger, and just have that open dialogue, that open conversation, and just hash it out.
I get it. Dominic.
I would go slow and help with small incremental wins to get on board.
So show them the value of product management with little wins to build I like that. I mean, instead of going fast and breaking things and losing your job.
Yeah, exactly.
Calvin.
Yes to what Steve said. No yes and, just yes.
All right, Marco.
So I'm going to agree with Steve too, but I'm also going to tie it to the previous poll, and that is the product leader needs to show the CEO that they provide value by explaining what they do and how this helps the CEO with the strategy.
Yeah, I like that. Danielle.
So my answer is twofold. One, I think it's the responsibility of a product leader to educate, right? You assume the position of educating the organization, educating your cross-functional stakeholders, the C-suite, and everybody in between about who you are role-wise, what you do functional-wise, and how you deliver value-wise. And then pair that with, I think what Dominic said, small wins. So make it digestible for CEO or whomever else in the C-suite to give you the runway to have these, small incremental gains. And once you get that traction, you're off, right?
Yeah, and actually, Steve, I think if you remember our friend Frank Tate, that was how he succeeded with it. The story he told back in the 90s was, let's find a small team, put them on the side, let them do it the right way, and see the results. Love that. May, before we move to our wrap up.
It depends. Is there a strategy? If the answer is no, work with your peers to make that strategy, because probably the CEO is not the person you want to work with, at least like not in the immediate tense. So if you have a good product strategy, you can work with your other heads of whatever to come up with the cohesive thing that makes sense, and together you say, this is what we want to do. You can bring the CEO into it, depends on your relationship with that person. If there is a cohesive corporate strategy, Make sure that alignment exists. Make sure you communicate how the corporate strategy translates into the product strategy, and draw that picture of how everything is aligned across the organization. Because it's like, it's not working with the CEO. The CEO has more stuff to do, right? It is
Yeah.
working with your peers to make sure your product is successful across the whole product.
No, it's great. And as always, give me a nice decision tree format so we can make it an easy process to implement. There we go, May. This has been such a fun conversation. Let's go to our takeaways. Marco, what's your biggest learning or takeaway?
Yeah, once again,
A big sigh.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it was that easy, right? And it's not that easy to change the CEO either. Usually you're stuck with them. Well, first of all, I would say definitely strategy. Make sure there is a strategy. Make sure that the CEO understands and can communicate the strategy. And if they can't, think about another organization.
Yeah, true. Dom.
Alignment. All about alignment.
It's all about
bringing
alignment.
value.
As Steve said, we can't go wrong with alignment. Calvin.
We talked a lot, and maybe it's me, but it seems like we talked a lot more about strategy than we have in the past, which is good, because that's kind of where I'm sitting in my role. The other thing that, and Danielle just mentioned this a moment ago, so thank you, Danielle, is small wins. And that's something that in my job, I need to be mindful of, is just making sure I'm moving the ball down the field just step by step, as opposed to swinging for the fences.
I love it. Dutch, are you able to help give a comment?
Yeah, takeaway is that product management is not just working in the business of the product strategy, but it's also needing to be a patient coach to the CEO on what product strategy is all about and why it's different than the business strategy. That's my takeaway.
I actually, you're sort of teasing where you might see me go with this. Awesome. Danielle.
I think the key takeaway for me is that it sounds like it's a widespread problem from my personal experience and just hearing the experience of others. But I guess my key takeaway is what type of, it's got me thinking about what type of framework we can use to approach these types of conversations with, executive leadership. There has to be some sort of like a formula, not technically, but right, something that we can follow to help express.
Yeah, we're still trying to crack that code, aren't we? Eva.
I think just being able to be vulnerable and valuing, this didn't really come up, but I talk about it every week, valuing diversity in your leadership teams. Hopefully not everybody looks alike. So
yeah, love it. May.
How do we do this better? Right? Like it's what Danielle said, like how do we systemically make sure people understand the value of product management so they don't cut the entire product management organization? How do we make sure our strategies are aligned? Like, can we make that a part of the product management purview? Should that be a part of the product management purview? Lots of questions, no answers.
More questions than we started with, maybe. My friend Steve.
I think product management needs to be better at communicating product management's value. We get together and talk about it. How come no one loves me as much as I love me? We need to start being better marketers of ourselves. And that's really a thing I put on the product leader.
Yeah.
To make sure, everybody's pretty clear that the salespeople think they're the most important part of the company. And yet I think it's hard to sell stuff if you don't have a product. Although
Yeah.
many salespeople have successfully sold products that don't exist, still, I think being a better communicator about where we add value is something we should all strive for.
Awesome. And honestly, I think mine's almost a summary of everything we just had in our takeaways. I had 3 bubbles, 3 circles. One is that strategy and strategic alignment. One is the culture things, and Eva, I'll pull into your diversity and how do we treat people and speaking truth to power and listening and communication. And the final one is we really need to understand what the value of product management is and be able to clearly communicate it. If we can get strategic alignment, if we can build the right culture, if we can understand and define the value and share it and evangelize it, all of a sudden, I think we get to that special place where we can go. What a great, oh my God, what a great conversation. Every week, I love these conversations. Marco, Dom, Calvin, Dutch, Danielle, wow, you came on strong. We have a lot of expectations from you moving forward. So we look forward to having you on future ones. Eva, May, my friend Steve, what a great conversation we've had. Next week, we're going to continue this. I don't know if Dutch peeked into my presentation again. It always seems like his answer is preluded. So we've talked about it almost in a, we have product management. Now, next week, we're going to talk about what's our advice to a CEO who does not have a product management function. Maybe a smaller company, maybe they haven't added product management yet. What would our advice be to a new CEO, a startup CEO, a smaller company CEO? Yes, Eva, run away. We can talk about that next week. And we do this every week. Monday, question goes in. Wednesday, we have a poll, and Fridays, these amazing conversations. Everybody, thank you for a great conversation. Yes, May, I have more questions in my head now than I have answers. Yes, Danielle, we actually have to figure this out so we can put some stuff together for people. And I think, you know, there's no better group I'd rather do it with, because every time we have these conversations, I learn, I grow, I get smarter and better. And that's all because of you guys. So everybody, thanks so much. We'll see you next week in the community. Have a great weekend, everybody.